From Anchored in Faith Gospel Church in Oxford, Iowa, this is Anchored in Faith.
Because I never really feel the Spirit in most TV, and I'm not saying they're bad, I just don't feel it like I do when I'm in church. So people that stay home, I think, and go to church at home on TV are missing, I think, what God's really doing. So, anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to Gideon, because that's where we're at, and I know everybody's waiting for him to win the battle against the Midianites. And of course, we've already looked at God selecting the army and sending those home that are scared. He says, if you're fearful, go on home. And a lot of churches should tell some of their members to go on home, because being a Christian is getting more and more difficult. To really stand for what Jesus says and what the Bible teaches is getting pretty, you got to be pretty brave. And a lot of these churches, if things get tough, they're not going to be able to stand, and their people aren't going to be able to stand, because they're just, they're fearful. Nobody wants to rock the boat anymore. Nobody wants to be controversial or mean-spirited or come across as some kind of, hateful person, or, you mean some people are sinners? Well, that's mean, and all of that. So we have this, fluffy, marshmallow Christianity today that would never have survived in the first century. Never. Never. We already said that, first century, how could we ever, anybody in a modern church, have survived? No buildings to meet in, no TV, no electronic stuff, no coffee bar, no mailing list, no bestsellers, none of that. You couldn't meet in public in the first century. Either the Jewish religious leaders would come after you, or the Romans, or both. So when we look at the first century church, we're looking at, a church on the run, in hiding, persecution. And just like in Gideon's time, Israel was on the run. Now, it was her own fault, because she had already, and this is the time of Gideon's about 100 years after Joshua came into the land. And in that time, they'd already been in bondage to all these nations more than once because of their idolatry. And so, again, Gideon is one of the many that God raises up to deliver Israel. And one of the things he did, of course, was to reduce the size of his army, and that's because he didn't want Gideon to say, well, look at me, with my 30,000 men. I conquered the Midianites. See, God had a thing about numbering the people. The kings of Israel were not supposed to number. That means take a census, like we do every 10 years, of the people, because he knew they'd get puffed up. David did it, and he got in trouble. So there's this thing about, God doesn't need a big group to accomplish what he wants. Now, he wants people saved and to come in, but he doesn't need a lot of people to do it. So Gideon is, he's going to beat the Midianites with 300 men. And if you remember the last time, we talked about the dream that was given to the two Midianites. Now, we have to review here, because I'm only up here once a month, so we do have to review a little bit. But if we look at Judges verse 7, or chapter 7, verse 9, again, Gideon sneaked up on the Midianites. He's out on a patrol. He's seeing, what the army looks like. He's listening, and he hears these two sentries. These are a couple Midianite guys. They're out on guard duty. They're talking to each other. Now, you would think that if they have this big army, they'd be talking about, wow, we're going to defeat Israel tomorrow. We're going to roll over them. But that's not what they're saying. One man says, go down to verse 13. When Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow, and said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came into a tent, and it smote it that it fell, and overturned it, that the tent lay along. In other words, it was flat. And his fellow answered and said, this is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For unto his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. Now, here these guys evidently both had this dream, and they're saying, we're going to get whipped. Gideon's going to roll over us. A barley cake's just nothing. It's like a loaf of bread. It's a very insignificant item. But the dream said it's going to roll into the camp, squash the tents, and destroy the host. And these guys are talking about, they should be talking about, we're going to beat Israel. But instead, they're already fearful. And so when Gideon overhears this, of course he worships. That's verse 15. And it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned to the host of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord hath delivered unto your hand the host of Midian. They haven't even fought the battle yet. And he says it's already done. As Brother Ray said. See, God doesn't dwell in time like we do. If he says something's done, it's done. He's not, for him, it's already done. It's not 10 years down the road. It's not 6 months. It is to us because we live, we have a beginning and we have an end. And time means something to us. So God says it's already done. We're the ones that have to get in his perspective. God told Abraham he'd have a son. It was 25 years before he got a son. So, but in God's way, it was already done. And Abraham's the one that stumbled and couldn't wait 25 years. Most Christians can't wait 25 minutes for God to do something. But Abraham tried to, shortcut and all of that. We know the story. But in God's way, it's already done. If he says you're healed, you're healed. Now, you may have to walk it out. You may have to walk it out for 6 months or whatever, a year. But that's what we have to do. But he's already said it's done. So he's given them the battle. He says it's already done. Already beat the Midianites. And that's what he tells Israel. There's a lot of instances where God is giving revelation to unsaved people. In the scripture, we have here, these Midianites, they're not Israelites. They're not serving God. They're idol worshipers. And yet God's given them this dream. So when we think of God, we have to realize that he will use, again, whatever means, the unsaved people, if he wants to accomplish his purpose. Now, if you want to look at this, you can go to Genesis 20, verses 3 through 18. Abraham and Abimelech. Abraham's dwelling in the land of Abimelech, the king. And, of course, Sarah, his wife, very beautiful woman. He's afraid Abimelech's going to take her. And so he says that she's my sister. Well, that's not too smart, because he figures, well, if it's your sister, then I can take her for my wife. So he takes her. And God gives Abimelech the dream. Now, Abimelech's not an Israelite. He's an idol worshiper. He's an unsaved person. But God speaks to him and says, you've got another man's wife. Give her back or I'm going to get you. So, Abraham tells a lie and, gets in trouble. So, there's one example. Another example is Joseph. Joseph, of course, we know about the dream of the sheaves of grain, and his brothers got upset because they bowed down to the one sheaf, and they sold him into slavery. They sold him to the Egyptians. And again, he gets accused falsely. You know the story. Potiphar's wife ends up in jail. So he's in jail. And who's he in jail with? Pharaoh's baker and Pharaoh's cupbearer. A couple of Pharaoh's servants. They made the Pharaoh mad, so he threw him in prison. And so Joseph, they have this dream. And they're dreaming. You want to look, or Joseph, they both have the dream. It's in Genesis 40, verse 1. Let me read it. They both have a dream. They can't figure it out. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. And down to verse 5 it says, they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officer that were with him, wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said, we have dreamed a dream. There's no interpretation. And lo, Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. Now he gives God the credit. Yeah. He says, God, if there's an interpretation, it's going to come from God. The chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup to Pharaoh. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto the palace, unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. That was his job, to hand the Pharaoh his drinking cup. And so Joseph interprets it. He says in 3 days you're going to be lifted up. And of course he says, don't forget me when you get restored to Pharaoh. Don't forget I'm in prison too, and I interpreted your dream. Well, of course we see what happens. He's restored, and he forgets all about Joseph. What happens to the baker? The baker, says the chief baker, saw that the interpretation was good. He said unto Joseph, I also was in a dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Joseph said, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh. So he got hung. But he interpreted both dreams for these unsaved Egyptians. Now again, they're not Israelites. They're idol worshipers. But yet, God uses them, Joseph, to interpret their dream. Then he interprets Pharaoh's dream. He has the dream of the 12 fat cows and the 12 lean cows. And the lean cows eat up the fat cows. And, of course, that means 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And so Joseph gets promoted. So again, God is using unsaved people for his purpose to advance his program. Because if Joseph hadn't been promoted, he couldn't have got his father and his brothers into Egypt to escape the famine that was in their home. That's why they came to Egypt, to buy grain. Okay, so then we look at Daniel chapter 2, verse 1 to 45, and this is where Nebuchadnezzar has the dream of the golden image. Remember, head of gold, shoulders of silver, chest of bronze, iron and clay. He couldn't understand it. And Daniel interprets the dream. He says that, this is the four kingdoms that are going to come, and the stone comes out and smashed, and he says, Nebuchadnezzar, you're the gold. You're the top one. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar likes that one because he's the ruler. But that's the interpretation. Babylon's in power. They're going to be replaced by the Persians. They're going to be replaced by the Greeks. They're going to be replaced by the Romans. So that was the interpretation. Now before that, we have the three Hebrew children. And they're thrown in the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they heat up the furnace, and the king's officer looks in, and he says, what do you see? I see one as the Son of God. There's a fourth man in the furnace. That was a revelation. Now, it wasn't a dream, but it was a revelation given to another, unsaved, non-Israelite, idol worshiper who is being shown who the real God is. He says it's the Son of God. Well, where did he get that? He sees Jesus in the furnace. That's who he saw. The angel of the Lord. That's always, when you see the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, that's always the pre-existent Christ appearing to somebody. Whether it's Moses or here or whatever. That's what you got. So, he reveals that. Now, remember, Nebuchadnezzar also loses his mind for 7 years. Chapter 4, verse 4, Daniel says, this is going to happen. You're going to lose your mind. You're going to act like an animal. What did he do? He ate grass for 7 years. He went totally insane. Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel said, it's going to happen. When he was restored, he gave glory to God. Now, for a short time, he gave glory to God, but Nebuchadnezzar did actually praise God after he was restored. But Daniel, again, interpreted this for the unsaved king of Babylon. And then finally we have the writing on the wall. And that's where Daniel interprets the writing on the wall. Belshazzar, who's the last king of Babylon, remember, he's partying, he's drinking, he's got all of his officers, he's in this big city. The Persians are there, they're laying siege to the city, and he thinks that we're safe. We got these thick walls and our army, and they're drinking, they're partying, and they're using the cups and from the temple in Jerusalem. The cups and the plates and all the things they took from the temple, they're using for this party. And all of a sudden, the writing appears on the wall. And it says, you've been found wanting. Daniel interprets it. He says, you're going to die tonight. And the Persians take the city that night and kill them all. So Daniel again is giving an interpretation to the king of Babylon. So God will do these things. Now, I don't know, perhaps somewhere in the world today, he's doing that with somebody that's not serving him, showing them something. And all of these people who received the dreams and the interpretations could have cried out to God and said, he's the real God. But they didn't. Now they could have. Pharaoh could have. Nebuchadnezzar could have worshiped God. He could have changed the whole religion of Babylon if he wanted. He was the king. He could do anything. He had all that power. But he didn't. And then finally in the New Testament we have Matthew 27:19. That's Pilate's wife who has a dream. Jesus is in jail. He's on trial by the Romans. And she warns her husband. She says, be careful what you do with this man. Now the Romans are pagans. They rule Israel, but they're not serving God. Pilate's not serving God. Pilate's probably not even serving the Roman gods. But she warns him, said, I had a dream. This man is righteous. Don't, be careful what you do with him. And of course, Pilate, what does he do? He takes the easy way out, turns him over to the Jews. And they are the ones who actually try him, because the Romans couldn't find anything wrong with him. He wasn't, a revolutionary. He didn't have an army. He wasn't trying to throw the Romans out. He wasn't trying to revolt. But the Jews said, well, he's making himself God. He says he's God. That's blasphemy under our law. And the Romans had this agreement, because Israel always in rebellion against Rome. There was always some leader that was coming up and said, I'm the Messiah, and he'd raise an army, and he'd, try to revolt, and the Romans would have to put it down. So the Romans kind of let them do their own thing. They said, well, he broke your law, so you're the ones that can try him, And that's what they did. They convicted him supposedly under the law of Moses because he said, he made himself God. He was blasphemous. So what we're trying to show you is that God will use whatever he needs to use. He's sovereign. Whatever he does is right. And that's a concept that we really have to get back to. Is that whatever God does is right. People look at the Bible and they say, oh, look at God did this. And he had all these people, he killed them all. But there's a reason for all of that. It's not just grumpy old God who wants to, get rid of people. That's the image that people have of God in the modern world, in the modern church. Is that, well, I don't know, it doesn't line up with my feelings and how I feel about how things should be. But whatever the God of the Bible does is right. If he puts people in hell, it'll be right. That's right. And that's getting harder and harder for many people to understand. Now, you know what? Islam teaches the same thing. If you don't get with the prophet, you'll go to hell. You'll burn in hell. That's what Islam teaches. If you do not submit to the prophet and Allah, you'll burn in hell. And nobody has a problem with that one. Nobody criticizes that. Nobody says that's it's only the Christians that get, laughed at and abused and talked about and persecuted for teaching like that. But Islam teaches exactly the same thing. Unbelievers will go and burn in hell. So if you have a problem with that doctrine, then you probably have a problem with Islam too. You should. But a lot of people they won't talk about that. That's all getting a pass. And that shows to me that the Christians are God's people because we're getting persecuted. Islam's not getting persecuted anywhere. They're on the march. They're on the march. And the church is dead. Now you look at Europe, the home of the Reformation, Germany, Martin Luther, and John Calvin, and all the great reformers that led all the great revivals. Europe is dead as a doornail. The churches there are just They're gone. And I mean, there's Christian groups there, don't get me wrong. There's Christians in Europe, but the formal churches are gone. You know, people are saying that Europe will be Muslim in 5 or 10 years. You know, and that's, and I don't talk about why that is, but mostly it's because the church has gone away. I mean, people are just not serving God. And so the Muslims have managed to do what they couldn't do, you know, in the past. They tried to invade Europe and they were turned back. 3 or 4 times they tried to invade Europe and they were turned back by the armies of the Christians. And now they're taken over with very little opposition. So that's neither here nor there, except to say that God, whatever he does, is right and righteous. And we have to get in line with him. You either get in God's flow and trust him, or you're going to get, you know, run over by what's coming. We haven't seen nothing yet. We think we have, but we haven't seen anything yet. God's using a lot of forces in the book of Judges. Now you'll see if you read the whole account of Gideon that it doesn't end up so well. But yet God used him, and he's, if you look at Hebrews 11, he's one of the heroes of the faith because he heard from God, he tested the spirits, he responded, and he did what God wanted him to do. And it's his faith that puts him there. So your faith is the only thing that's going to please God. Not your works, not your church attendance, not your tithing. Oh, look at that. Don't get on that one, boy. But your money, you can give your tithe and still be lost. Oh, now, whoa. Oh, where'd you hear that? Well, it's true. It's your faith that's going to save you, not your works. And works is going to church and Sunday school, teaching class, whatever. Being up here isn't going to save me. I'm sorry, it's not. Playing your music and dancing and shouting, I love it, but it's not going to save you. It's your faith. It's what causes you to do that. It's what's going to save you. Gideon's got a lot of problems, but all of them do. Look at Samson. Samson's there too. And I think he's a bigger mess than Gideon was. God says that he's a hero of the faith. Hebrews 11. We have to remember that it's our trust and our faith in God in the end that's going to save us. And not, our religious activities.
Full sermons are available anytime at www.anchoredinfaith.org. Contact us by calling 319-828-4815 or write us at Anchored in Faith, P.O. Box 204, Oxford, Iowa 52322, or email us at tv@anchoredinfaith.org. This has been a copyrighted presentation of Anchored in Faith Gospel Church, Oxford, Iowa.